Narayana namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudiraye. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion of the second canto, and we are yet to conclude the last few verses of the um, most important chapter in all of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the previous session, we touched upon the crystallization of these four verses. The crystallization of these four verses is that amongst the four Vedas, the Yajur Veda is the origin. From the Yajur Veda, all the Puranas and Itihasas were extracted. And after all the Puranas and Itihasas were extracted, they basically compiled and recompiled the Vedas into four different parts. And the Puranas and Itihasas overall had more than 1 billion verses. And then the Vedas were also basically crystallized, or the essence of the Vedic knowledge was crystallized into the Vedanta Sutra. Now, the Vedanta Sutra in itself, to my knowledge, it has approximately around 550 to 600 verses, a total of between 550 to 600 verses. So, in conclusion, the essence of all the Vedas are supposed to be the Vedanta Sutras, and the Puranas in themselves are supposed to be the authoritative realization and the essence of all the Vedas. They are 1 billion verses, but then what's available here on this planet is 400,000 verses, which is a fraction. So what we have here is all the Puranas is just a very condensed form of the original version. Now, the conclusion, the natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra is Srimad Bhagavatam. So basically, you're talking about the conclusion of the billions of verses found in the Vedas, the billions of verses found in the Puranas. That conclusion is being crystallized into 4 verses, and this is the preaching of Lord Narayan to Lord Brahma. Now, what is very important is that why is it being given to us right at the onset? We need to again and again come back to a very simple concept that we cannot serve without knowing who we are. We cannot serve without knowing the object of our service. And service by quality also means that we should have completely surrendered. What does it mean when we say complete surrender for service? Service, when it is needed to be done in the fullest extent, is where we can think of nothing but the object of service. Everything else can be compromised, and everything else can be basically facilitated in the context of the main object of service. That requires surrender. You can't really you can't really say that you're serving without surrender. And this is understood by those who were around great personalities. This is understood by, for example, Lord Hanuman. Hanumanji, who is supposed to be the finest example of Dasya Bhakti, is always available. In his heart, Lord Ram always resides with Mother Sita and Lakshman. So you basically have an example where there really isn't a moment where there is an existence away from the object of love. That is basically Hanumanji's example. There really isn't a moment where there is an existence away from the object of love. This requires complete surrender, where you don't really have a life. You really don't have a life beyond the object of love, and which is actually the true nature of service. The true nature of service is where you're 100% available night and day, and you're available through your life, and you're constantly reprioritizing the object of love. And this is basically how service is to be rendered. And as a consequence, if one were to say that proper service and devotional service is what we want to do, then one has to be in love, because without love, one can't surrender. And as a consequence, this whole summary of 4 verses talks about the determination of the ingredients of how one should prepare to serve. Because how do you serve? You can't serve unless you know the object of service. So the Lord is talking about himself, saying, I am the object of service. You can't serve without knowing your specific relationship with the object of service, the object of love. So you need to know your sambandha between yourself and the Lord. And then you need to know how to serve, understanding what is considered to be service versus what is considered to be speculation. In other words, when are you detracting yourself and when are you basically accepting this particular kind of service? All of these needs to be known. So in other words, you need to know when you're obeying your senses versus when are you obeying the need of service for the Lord's senses versus our senses. So there's a need for us to understand when is it that we can judge something as being transcendental versus non-transcendental. So all of these particular aspects are being explained in the 4 verses. And here, he doesn't really talk about any specific path of spirituality. He says that if you can't find these ingredients in the specific path of spirituality that you have adopted, then we can conclude that there's something missing there. All of these have to be there. One has to understand the object. You have to learn whom to serve. You have to find the right personality, the right master for you to be able to submit yourself. There's a quality of consciousness for us to be able to serve. There's a certain prerequisite for us to be able to serve. We need to know ourselves as well, because our conditioning has made us quite defective in many ways. So we are slowly, steadily coming back to rejecting different aspects of priorities set by our conditioning to be able to serve. And then finally, we talk about the fact that if you really want to exist and you want to do some service and you want to know what to do, because all of us want to ask, what is it that I'm supposed to do in this world? What is it that I have to engage in? What is my priority? One can't realize what their priority is unless they are free of their conditioning. And to free ourselves of our conditioning, we need to find someone who has seen the truth. So the path is being described that you go and find a master, a spiritual master, who has seen the truth and submit yourself by service. He becomes the proxy for the Lord. As you receive service from us through as a proxy, as a representative of the Lord, then we qualify ourselves more and more as we advance in our service to the spiritual master. What happens is that as we serve, he looks upon us with mercy. And because of his glance of mercy, the bhakti in the heart of the spiritual master enters into our heart through his Vani. So he speaks, and the bhakti in his heart enters into our heart through our ears. So that's why Shravanam is so important, is because when we hear, we also hear the sambandha of the spiritual master. When the spiritual master speaks, we are hearing the sambandha of the spiritual master with Krishna. And then when that sound vibration enters into our heart, it destroys our nations. It establishes our connection to Krishna. And this is how service begins. And as we serve along, what happens is there's a need for knowledge. What is the need for knowledge? What is the need for discussing Srimad Bhagavatam? Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna himself. What is the need for the Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam? The need for the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita is to understand what is it to experience Sambandha Gyan. How do we develop Sambandha Gyan? When you come in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam, you're literally coming in touch with Krishna. So we develop Sambandha Gyan. Now the point is, once one has attained experiences in terms of really coming in touch with Krishna, then there isn't much need for knowledge, because the knowledge itself of what to do and how to experience is already being reacted, or rather the person who is experiencing this is fully embracing what the experience itself, rather than hearing what the experience is going to be. Now, where is an example in our Acharya Varga of an illiterate who basically was an exalted personality who had realized knowledge of Sambandha? His Krishna Sambandha was complete. He knew who he was in the line of the gopis. He knew who he was in the line of the divine couple. And he was serving the divine couple in his original conception as a servant, and as he was on the planet as well. But he was a complete illiterate, in the sense that one couldn't really say that he had read all the scriptures, because he wasn't illiterate. He wasn't literate in his native language. He wasn't literate in Sanskrit. This is Gaura Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. He was fully realized. So that's an example of someone who has realized spiritual knowledge through the mercy of Harinam, through the mercy of association, through the mercy of his sadhana. And at that point in time, reading is not required, because he is already experiencing what ought to be experienced. He is chanting Harinam and he is serving the divine couple through Harinam. So for us, we have several examples We have examples of those who are extraordinarily well-read. Their scholarship is beyond reproach. And then there are also examples of those who are completely illiterate who have achieved the same examples, same results. Sorry. Now you have, for example, in our own parampara, not in our parampara, in general, we speak of the greatness of Sri Narad Muni. If you look at Sri Narad Muni, he initiated and basically was a guru of Sri Valmiki. He was a guru of Srila Vyasadeva. He was a guru of Prahalad Maharaj. He was a guru of Dhruva Maharaj. He was basically present in all the most important junctures of Srimad Bhagavatam. He basically was the guru of all the personalities who mattered in terms of devotional service. Now, what is interesting is that he was also the guru of a very illiterate, unread hunter who wasn't very skilled and educated in terms of any kind of culture. He was a hunter and he was engaged in activities which are quite abominable. So the proof of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the proof of our literature is such that one who engages in devotional service, especially the service and the acceptance of a guru, is so powerful that our pre-qualifications themselves, do not matter. One could be very sinful. One could be completely free of sin. One could basically be completely well-versed in scripture. And at the same time, yeah, one could be very well-versed in scripture. And at the same time, one may not be well-versed in scripture. One could just be very simple-hearted and wanting to serve the devotees. All of these different designations do not matter because every one of these has a very beautiful example of success in our history. So our history of bhakti is such that everyone has found success, and regardless of who they are. So what is very important for us to realize in these 4 verses is the fact that there are fundamental ingredients. One needs to be surrendered. One needs to be in love to be properly surrendered. Only when we are in love and we are properly surrendered would we know how to make ourselves fully available. We would understand the need for service. We would even understand what is it the beloved wants. Even before Krishna asks for something, we would know what is it that he wants, what is it which he's desiring, how to position ourselves. We're constantly thinking of how to serve. So this particular position requires surrender and love. Now that is what is being reiterated again and again in these 4 verses, where Krishna himself comes and he's giving instructions to Lord Brahma. Now, what we are going to do is we're going to conclude the chapter today, because the next chapter, which is chapter 10, elaborates on the 10 different principles of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 10 different topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. So a very interesting session in terms of the interesting topics or different divisions of knowledge, as given in the Bhagavatam, is going to be discussed in subsequent sessions. There are 10 different, I would say, principles, summaries, or descriptions of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that we're going to look into in the subsequent chapter, the next chapter. The 4 verses that we read for the past 3 sessions are basically encapsulating the billion verses of the Puranas. It's encapsulating the 4 Vedas. It is basically the essence of the 18,000 verses that we read in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's why this makes it super important. And what is the foundation again? The foundation is Sambandha. What is our sadhana? Our sadhana is primarily designed to increase our Sambandha. That is our sadhana. That is all we are doing. When we dress up and go as devotees, we are reiterating our identity as being a servant of the Lord. Yeah? Dress matters. Now, it matters because it motivates you. Now, it doesn't mean that that is the be-all and end-all. It doesn't really mean that what you are externally is going to reflect fully in what you are internally. One could dress up in certain ways, but then may not be internally conscious and sincere as someone else who may not really have the external trappings, but they could be very sincere. But it matters as a matter of process, because this is vidhi. We want to follow in the footsteps of the Lord's servants. And as a consequence, when we do take some trouble to present ourselves as devotees, then it instills a certain confidence in us. Yeah, it instills a certain kind of culture. Then there is the whole concept of coming together, and the coming together of devotees of the same type, being able to come and support each other in different aspects of our devotional service. And then comes the aspect of being able to engage in activities which mimic the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam, mimic in the sense, represent the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So you have, for example, Guru Puja. Guru Puja, particularly in our day, is so important, but the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 4 verses of Chatushloki talks about the same. You need to approach the spiritual master, because with the assistance of the spiritual master, you have the ability to receive Sambandha, because the spiritual master's Sambandha in his heart can be transferred to us by his mercy. That is called bhakti. Yeah, the Sambandha of Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is the divine couple, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was Krishna, but in the mood of Srimati Radharani. That Sambandha was passed on to the heart of Srila Rupa Goswami. He elaborated the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And then his Sambandha, Srila Rupa Goswami's heart, it was passed on to the other Goswamis. They passed it on to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur elaborated things. All of these aspects were distilled and presented to us by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's teachings, in combination with Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Jiva Goswami, were represented in the purports and the writings of our Prabhupada. So basically what we are talking about is, this is the descent of Bhakti, and this is the descent of their Sambandha. The extent of their Sambandha, as revealed by Mahaprabhu, is passed on from one heart to the other in disciplic succession through sound vibration. And when the sound enters into our heart, through the process of initiation, through the process of our surrender and our service, then we have the ability to develop Sambandha towards Krishna. Bhakti is not controlled by Krishna. Bhakti Devi is not managed by Krishna. She is independent. She resides in the hearts of the devotees because the devotees have bhakti towards Krishna. So it is Bhakti Devi who springs from the heart of the spiritual master and comes into our heart. This is being highlighted in the Samsara Dava prayers. It is also being highlighted in the Guru Puja that we do in the morning. Then we basically worship the deities. We engage in the worship of Srimati Tulsi Devi because she represents Vrindavan, and she represents, or rather Tulsi Devi is a representation of all of Vraja and all the activities contained within Vraja. One who worships Mother Tulsi, Srimati Tulsi Devi, Vrinda Devi, will have the ability to receive all that is needed for them to be able to move forward in Sambandha to the spiritual couple, to the divine couple. So basically the worship of Tulsi is initiated. We call upon Harinam, and then we discuss Srimad Bhagavatam. Basically, the 4 verses are programmized with activity, with a certain order, with a certain precise culture, which has been drawn from Shastric conclusions, which was followed by our Acharyas. So if you notice, if you just follow what Srila Prabhupada gave us very clearly, you will find that the Sambandha increases. And the Sambandha increases because all the ingredients are very well thought of. And they have been put together in such a way that when you keep coming in touch with it very profoundly, then we would have the ability to absorb things and be able to move forward. So this has been designed very carefully. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur took all of this and then he enunciated the 5 principles. He said, you have to have sadhu sangha. Srila Prabhupada took sadhu sangha very clearly. So he created different ISKCON centers around the world where there could be sadhu sangha. Then you have to have Harinam, which is Nama Kirtan, Nama Smaran. So there was Kirtan and Nama Japa that is being programmed, or rather being encouraged in all these centers, which is the mainstay of our movement. And then you have Bhagavat Shravanam. So there's a Bhagavatam class. And then there is the worship of the deities. And then there is an atmosphere which is being created with Vrinda Devi, with Tulsi Maharani, with the worship of the divine couple as deities. All of this particularly is the Panchanga Bhakti. Srila Prabhupada basically wanted to take the 5 core principles and he developed a set of activity that we have to do, whilst incorporating the 4 verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, ensuring that as we come in touch with his program, we would also be principally coming in touch with the foundation of the 4 verses given in Srimad Bhagavatam as the Chaturshloki. So this was our Srila Prabhupada's planning. This is actually phenomenally clear and very straightforward planning for us to be able to move forward, and that has a very clear foundation on the most important verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, which basically represents the essence of all that exists in terms of spiritual knowledge and the path of spirituality. So everything is being given in the activity that has been done. So there's a certain meaning to what we do, and it is all founded on the same principles as we have been talking about. Now, let's just go through the remaining verses, and then we'll take some questions. So verse 37 of Canto 2, chapter 9, 37. Yeah. O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial nor in the final devastation. You see, this is very important. Basically, fixed concentration of mind. How do you concentrate your mind? What is the specific mode that allows us for maximum concentration? The mode of passion is when the mind is engaging in sankalpa, vikalpa. The mode of passion is when the mind is engaging in, okay, I'm accepting this and I'm rejecting this. I'm accepting this, I'm rejecting this. This is basically the mode of passion: acceptance, rejection, acceptance, rejection. Now, which is the particular mode that allows for maximum concentration is the mode of goodness. So the first principle which Krishna is talking about is stay situated in the mode of goodness. Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu. Get rid of passion and ignorance, stay situated in the mode of goodness. That would allow you the concentration of mind. No pride will disturb you. What is pride? Pride comes from the idea that we are basically what we would call as we take on an individual identity associated with the activity that we perform. Pride is basically when we start thinking that we are the creator, maintainer, destroyer. No pride will touch you. Krishna says no pride will touch you because then there is knowledge. The knowledge is that Krishna is the doer. We are supposed to do everything in this world as if it depends on us, but we ultimately also to have the knowledge that Krishna is basically the doer. So the results can never be controlled. A beautiful example of our existence on this planet, was given by my spiritual master, His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj. It is actually a great example I heard in one of his lectures. It is said a farmer who is an expert, he selects the best of seeds. He really chooses the best variety of seeds. And then he takes all these seeds and then he also plans his particular year. There's something called the Farmer's Almanac. It is basically the seasonal almanac. It is like what we call the astrological calendar for the year. It's used worldwide. And then they use a seasonal chart of when a season is supposed to begin, when the season is supposed to end. So a farmer's almanac, a farmer basically plans by selecting the best of seeds. He also chooses a certain time of the year when he is going to keep the land ready and he's going to sow the seeds. So when the time comes, he sows the seeds after very carefully selecting the seeds to improve his yield. He also chooses the time of the year, saying this time of the year is the best according to my calculations, because this is when it's going to rain. There's going to be monsoon just after this. So when I prepare my land, I've sown my seeds, there would be monsoon. And as a consequence, my yield would be very good. And the agricultural produce that I'm trying to do would really flourish. Now, this is what a farmer does. He does what he thinks he can do in the best possible manner without compromise. However, we got to remember this. The farmer can select the seeds. He can select the best time of the year. But sometimes the monsoon could start a week earlier than he begins his work. He would lose the entire year if the monsoon begins before his work. He would lose the entire year because he hasn't prepared the land. The seeds are not sown. If the monsoon comes earlier than planned, he could lose the year. If the monsoon comes very late, a month, two, much later than after he has planted the seeds, he could still lose the year. Now, what is that particular factor which is very clear that he doesn't have any control over the year and the outcome of the year? That is basically the time factor, which is Krishna himself. So this remembrance has to be there. That's why pride and false pride are combinations of false pride, basically. You have to take pride in your work, but false pride is when you start thinking that you are the controller. Yeah, you have to take pride in your work, but false pride is when you start thinking that you are the controller. So you need to do your best, but at the same time understand that Krishna controls everything. Yeah, you have to do your best. At the same time, you have to understand that Krishna controls everything. He manages everything. He manages everything. And as a consequence, even if you have chosen the right seeds as the farmer would, even if you've chosen the right kind of time, then there's always this particular window where the unexpected can happen and the overall result can be modified. That's why we are very clear in our standard of bhakti that we would do what is required as if it depends on us. We will do everything as if it depends on us, but we will leave the results to the Lord. Yeah? We will do everything as if it depends on us, but we will leave the results to the Lord, which is how we plan things. Yeah? We do everything as if it depends on it, which means you don't think that Krishna has to come and he has to do everything. All the heavy lifting would be done by us, but we would also have this deep understanding that despite my planning, despite my effort, Krishna still controls the results. The outcome itself can be very different. So this is also a conclusion that we can reach. So when you have that conclusion very deeply in our heart, then there is no pride. Pride also comes because we have identified with this body. We have identified with this body. We have identified with this particular situation where of understanding that, oh, this is who I am and this is what I'm supposed to do. Pride also is a result of identifying this body, which is basically the other way of saying that we take ownership for the results because we identify with the body. Less and less, as devotees go, less and less identification with the body, then greater and greater would be their ability to accept the results of work. They are more accepting, more tolerant as they move further and further away from bodily identification, go deeper and deeper into the aspect of identifying with the original identity of Krishna's servants. Please understand, acceptance of the reality of life becomes greater as we come closer to our original identity of being accepting who we are. Yeah, I've given this example before. It is like a train journey. The more you understand that this is a train journey and your final destination is elsewhere, but you have to still do your very best in this short time frame, then you would not be associating too much to this particular journey to the point where it is facilitating you. You have to constantly facilitate your journey by saying, okay, I'm making all the arrangements so that the journey can be done, but at the same time, my destination is somewhere else. The journey and the train itself is not my destination. Life is like a train journey. You have to facilitate it, but at the same time, have the understanding that there will be a stop and you have to get off the train at some point. This is very important for us to understand. Now, he says about partial nor final devastation. When you take complete ownership of the work that you do, you also react to the results. So if something gets destroyed of the work that you do, which is inevitable, we also really reel in pain. But at the same time, if we take everything as Krishna's ownership, and we also understand that the results are owned, but we put in our very best efforts, we will be able to accept the outcome regardless, which is basically very fundamental to saying that the more and more you work on accepting the identity of being Krishna's servant, less and less will we be affected by the outcomes, and greater would be our focus on giving pleasure to the senses of Krishna. Now, text 38, Sukadeva Goswami said to Maharaj Parikshit, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, after being seen in his transcendental form, instructing Brahmaji, the leader of the living entities, disappeared. So the Lord appeared, he instructed Lord Brahma, and then he became unmanifest. The Lord appeared, he instructed Lord Brahma, and then he became unmanifest. This is wonderful. When did this instruction happen? This instruction happened after Lord Brahma chanted for 1,000 years, tapaha. He engaged in tapasya and he chanted the Gopala mantra for 1,000 years. After chanting for 1,000 years, he has darshan of the Lord and he receives instructions on the Lord's plan. This is Lord Brahma receiving the blueprint of what Krishna wants him to do. So we go back again to our discussions earlier on in the canto. If you're situated in the mode of goodness, you have the ability to come in touch with spiritual reality. When you come in touch with spiritual reality, we will have the ability to understand the plan of the Lord. When we understand the plan of the Lord, then we become instruments. This is basically Lord Brahma's life. He became situated in the highest position in this universe, in Satyaloka, in the highest level of consciousness. Understand that different lokas have different levels of consciousness. As you raise your consciousness, you have the ability to come in touch with different lokas, the different planetary systems. And Lord Brahma was situated in the highest planetary system, and he was basically in Satyaloka, and he was receiving, or rather, he put himself in a platform of being able to come in touch with spiritual reality. Then he hears the word tapaha. Then he is initiated into the Gopal mantra. He chants for 1,000 years. He receives darshan of the Lord. He receives instructions of what the Lord wants him to do. And as a consequence, he understands the blueprint of what the Lord wants him to do. Without sambandha, you can't serve. Lord Brahma received sambandha gyan when the Lord appeared. When you see the Lord, when you understand your position in relationship to the Lord, and when you start hearing what the Lord expects you to do, your sambandha is complete. Then you can engage in abhideya activity. You can engage in abhideya. And increasing abhideya in line with the Lord's desires while surrendering to him and Sambandha increases, it finally reaches to the conclusion of Prema. So this is basically the beginning of Prema. Yeah, Krishna Prema is limitless, and Bhava is the beginning of Prema. One engages in tapasya to let go of their previous conditioning by coming in touch with Harinam. And by coming in touch with Harinam, once the conditioning is gone, they become ready to understand the relationship. Once the relationship is understood, the quality of service improves. And then ultimately, it results in prema. So what begins with love also increases in great proportion of love. As the sambandha increases, greater would be the love, greater would be the quality of service. I've often given this example. Spontaneity found in Braj is not found elsewhere. You don't need Mother Yashoda. Mother Yashoda doesn't need sadhana for her to recognize her relationship. She does not need sadhana to be a proper mother to Krishna. To serve him as a mother, she does not need sadhana. So that is when the sambandha increases, then service improves, then there is really no need of any theoretical knowledge because everything becomes very natural, which is practically the path for all of us. Yeah. One moment. Okay, verse 38. Krishna appears, gives instructions, and he leaves. Verse 39. On the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, who is the object of transcendental enjoyment for the senses of the devotees, Brahma, with folded hands, began to recreate the universe full with living entities as it was previously. Now, complete with Sambandha Gyan and with complete knowledge of the instructions of the Lord, knowledge of who he is in relationship with the Lord Brahma is increasing his activity and he's increasing the quality of his service with great zest. Text 40. Thus, once upon a time, the forefather of living entities and the father of religiousness, Lord Brahma, situated himself in acts of regulative principles, desiring self-interest for the welfare of all living entities. Okay, so here it is very clear. He is situating himself in the acts of regulative principles. Vidhi starts with Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma's other name is Vidhi, rules, regulations. So we follow Vidhi, we align ourselves with Vidhi to the maximum extent. By aligning ourselves with Vidhi to the maximum extent, in other words, whatever is required of by scripture, whatever is required of by the Guru and Shastra, we then have the ability to stay protected as we walk along. The spontaneity that is required and the spontaneity and the quality of spontaneity would automatically crop up as we walk on this path towards Krishna. Yeah, the spontaneity is automatic. It is organic. It is also enthused by coming in touch with those who are also greedy for the same spontaneity. It is also encouraged in different ways. But what I am trying to say is, stay within the boundaries of Vidhi. Stay within the boundaries of Vidhi. Let there be spontaneity in Vidhi first. Let there be spontaneity where we jump out of the bed to chant. Let there be spontaneity where we are very eager to serve and associate. Then that spontaneity would automatically transfer itself into wanting to serve the divine couple in Goloka. You don't need to jump guns here. You just need to ensure that we are on a safe path. Yeah, we don't really need to jump order. We just need to be in order, stay protected, keep doing what you've been asked to do, follow the rules, regulations as Lord Brahma did. And then there will come a day when the spontaneity that we experience in serving the Lord according to rules and regulations would transport itself into spontaneity where you would be able to recognize the recognize the need of the Lord, and you would be able to spontaneously make arrangements for him. Yeah? What is a spontaneous arrangement? Say, for example, a child is hungry. The mother instinctively would know the child is hungry. She does not need to be told that the Rajbhog Aarti is at 12:30, so be there at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock or 11, whatever the time may be. She does not need to be told that you need to wake up your child because he needs to be woken up at a certain time. Okay, there needs to be no preparation for the mother. The point is, spontaneity is achieved as we go along and very strictly follow Vidhi. When we see spontaneity coming in our day-to-day activities, we can then come in touch with those who are already very eager for wanting to develop a deeper attachment. And this discipline of being spontaneous in Vidhi will transfer itself to the discipline and the safeguard of coming in touch with the Lord through his devotees, through his Shastra, through everything else. The point being that one doesn't have to start with spontaneity, is the point I'm trying to make. I hope this makes sense. Text 41. Narada, the most dear of the inheritor sons of Brahma, always ready to serve his father, strictly follows the instructions of his father by his mannerly behavior, meekness, and sense control. Yeah, quite fascinating. He is the origin of the inspiration for bhakti for practically everyone. Sri Narad Muni, he is an incarnation, the great sage is an incarnation of the Lord who practically has the ability to give bhakti at every circumstance. And what we read in the Srimad Bhagavatam is many of his accomplishments. One could be born in the womb of a mother who is in a clan of demoniac entities. Sri Narad Muni can initiate and give instructions while the child is in the womb. This happened with Sri Prahlad Maharaj. Sri Narad Muni can interject and give the right path to a 5-year-old boy and assisting him to become a good devotee. This is Dhruva Maharaj. Sri Narad Muni can practically instruct Valmiki. He can instruct Srila Vyasadeva. These are just fascinating accomplishments in the area of bhakti. But here it is being said that he was also very meek, and he was also very, very controlled, and he was very, I would say, orderly in his behavior with his father. There never was a situation where he basically took on a seat which was much bigger than his father, even though he is far more accomplished. Yeah, very, very accomplished. Text 42. Narada very much pleased his father and desired to know all about the energies of Vishnu, the master of all energies. For Narada was the greatest of all sages and the greatest of all devotees, O king. Text 43. The great sage Narada also inquired in detail from his father Brahma, the great grandfather of all the universe, after seeing him well satisfied. 44. Thereupon, the supplementary Vedic literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, which was described by the personality of Godhead, and which contains 10 characteristics, was told with satisfaction by the father to his son. So the 10 characteristics of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that we're going to read about in the next chapter. And that is basically to be read in the context of the 4 verses that we have already read in the chapter that we're doing now. In other words, we keep the foundation of Srimad Bhagavatam, of Sambandha, and then we look for everything else to be sitting, or rather to be supported by what we already know. Text 45. In succession, O king, the great sage Narada instructed Srimad Bhagavatam onto the unlimitedly powerful Vyasadeva. Unlimitedly powerful, that expression, unlimitedly powerful, is being given to Srila Vyasadeva, who was none other than Narayana himself. Only Narayana, Krishna himself, could have the vision that Srila Vyasadeva had of every nook and corner of consciousness, and we spoke about it in quite some detail in the previous session. Only he could do this. And the level of realization Srila Vyasadeva presented in the commentaries and the translations, the commentaries and the different verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, the level of realization was unparalleled. It is said that nobody other than God himself could have done this. That's why he's called unlimitedly powerful. Who meditated in devotional service upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the absolute truth, on the bank of river Saraswati. Text 46. O king, your questions as to how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead, as well as other questions, I shall answer in detail by explanation of the 4 verses by already mentioned. So now the details of the Srimad Bhagavatam that we are going to read about are primarily an expansion of these 4 verses. So we need to come back again and again to read the foundation. So this way we would take things in proper context and have an understanding that why we are doing what we are doing, is very important in anything that we do in devotional service specifically, because you can get lost in details. Over a period of time, we can get lost and we can actually think that, we might lose context of why we are doing what we're doing. But this is just phenomenal, where if you have a solid foundation, then you have the ability to kind of come back and say that this is the principle that I understood in the second canto, 9th chapter, amongst the 4 verses. That principle is being expanded upon in this particular story, in this katha. So you can come back again and again to see how all of this kind of adds up and falls in place. So it's quite structured and very, very interesting to see how this is all being given. And Krishna is involved. Krishna speaks the 4 verses. The Chatushloki has come from Krishna. The expansion of the Chatushloki is done by Srila Vyasadeva. Now, the point is that Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita as well. Even here, Krishna speaks. The Chatushloki has been given by him. The expansion is being done by Srila Vyasadeva. So what we will do is that we will take this and we will try and see how best to adhere to this discipline of understanding the context through these 4 verses as we go further into Srimad Bhagavatam. So the next session, which is chapter 10, I would request all the devotees to read through chapter 10, canto 9. And I'm going to make an extra effort. I've been very, very lax in loading all the audios. I'm going to put all the audios up. I'm going to request Bhavish Prabhu to do all of this tonight. And then you will have it on both YouTube and SoundCloud. And we should be able to basically come back to hear this. What we will do is we will take this and then we'll go into the next chapter the subsequent week. The next chapter is where you have the 10 different, characteristics of Srimad Bhagavatam that is going to be expanded upon. Okay, so I'll stop here, and we have concluded chapter 9, and we have actually taken quite some time, but it was required, and hopefully we were able to share things that are of importance and stress on the actual, the foundation. So next week onwards, we will start expanding on it. So I'll stop here. I'll see if you have any questions, and I could take some. Hare Krishna, any questions? I'm sorry if I just want to make sure that we are now in Q&A.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Haribol.
Yeah, thank you for the wonderful class, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, what is the best way to remember Krishna 24 hours? I mean, it's very difficult to keep Krishna in mind 24 hours, but...
Yes, actually, it's a very good question. In reality, it's difficult. The reason why it's difficult is because you cannot remember someone 24/7 unless you're in love with them. Because when someone is in love, even from a mundane perspective, it is sometimes picturized, it is written about those who are in love. They can't seem to even sleep, they can't seem to eat, they can't seem to do anything because they're constantly remembering their beloved. So the whole concept of being able to remember Krishna all the time, 24/7, is achieved when we fall in love with him. However, the way we do it in Vidhi Bhakti is we basically break down what is the most important core principles, which is the 5 principles of Sadhu Sangha, Namasmaran, Namakirtan, Bhagavad Shravanam, Srimurti Seva, and Dham Seva, Dham, being desiring to live in the Dham. We break this down, and we also break up our services such as distributing of books, coming in touch with devotees and giving them Krishna, etc. We break it down and we look and see what we could achieve on a monthly basis. What is it that we can achieve on a weekly basis? What is it that I must do today for me to achieve what I need to do for the week? What is it that I need to do for the week to achieve what I need to do for the month? And so on, so that I can achieve something for the year. I have said this before. Krishna consciousness is not a walk on the plains of a field. You can't really expect that you're going to take a walk on a field where there are no uphills, no downhills. It's a flat field. You keep walking, and at some point in the future, you'll come in touch with reality. That's not how it works. It is like climbing a mountain. Each and every year, the effort has to improve. You have to put in a greater level of effort compared to the previous year if you have to achieve better results. And it's common sense that if you want to achieve something which is better than the previous year, you need to do more this year, improve upon what you did, etc. So the point which I'm trying to make is that that is how we basically think about Krishna. We break down this overall objective of always thinking about Krishna into activities that are approved by Shastra. And then we start breaking down what we need to do in a year. We set objectives. People who distribute books, it's very clear for them. They set objectives of, I'm going to distribute X number of Srimad Bhagavatam sets. I'm going to distribute X number of Bhagavad Gitas. I'm going to go to this location. If I've only been distributing in 2 locations, maybe I will expand to 4. These are things, I'm just giving an example, that people could do. Now, the point is that we can break it down into the 4 primary activities, the 5 primary activities. And then what we can do is we can see how we are experiencing these 5 primary activities. This would also allow us to see if there are improvements. Am I getting more eager? Am I experiencing a greater level of eagerness as we go along? That's actually a good way to look at it. The effort that we put in general, should make us feel more eager to do the same thing in the subsequent months, years, etc. So am I achieving that? Am I being able to do more as we go along? If I'm not able to do it, then we start looking more closely to see where we could improve upon it. The point I'm trying to make is that we need to break down this objective of Manmanabha Madbhakto Madhyajivam Namaskuru, which is to always think of Krishna, into activity that has been given by the Acharyas. That has to be broken down into yearly, monthly, weekly, daily achievements. If we can do that, then we keep improving upon what we did this week compared to the previous week, this month compared to the previous month, this year compared to the previous year. Then there would be a time when we would be able to say that we are making headway, or rather, we are at least doing what we are supposed to do from this perspective. Mercy would be given. We don't need to manage mercy. It's actually not manageable by us. We just need to do what we can do and improve upon it. I hope this makes sense. You need to break it down into activity of sadhana. That's what we need to do.
Yes, Prabhuji. It is, what I understood is like practically in our routine, that how, because doing household chores, or my husband, like, he's busy in office work. When we are doing devotional activity like deity worship or japa or hearing lecture, then it is still easier that Krishna is in our thoughts. But when we are doing other things, right? So in that sense, how to maintain that thing, like,
I still, when you say other things, I think we go back to what we discussed the last week. Yeah. When you say other things, are you referring to, what are you referring to when you say other things?
for example, I'm celebrating my daughter's birthday,
Yeah.
and Prabhu is doing office work. Something I want to more clarity in that terms.
Yeah. See, the problem is as follows. You're trying very best to associate an activity that may not directly be connected to the 5 primary objectives of Krishna consciousness, and trying to fit that in and saying that, okay, somehow I have to understand that I'm doing something in relation to Krishna. In reality, you can say that this is your duty, right? In the sense that you basically are born into a certain body, you are connected to people around you, and there are certain duties that are born of being born in the body that you're in. And those duties need to be performed. That is your dharma. So we tolerate the circumstances of the dharma that we have to perform. We execute our devotional service in the context, rather, we tolerate the circumstances of the dharma that we perform. You don't need to find it enjoyable. You do not need to find it extraordinarily exciting, because it may not be so. But you need to tolerate the circumstances of doing the dharma that we need to do based on the body we are in. Whilst doing that, we also need to incorporate aspects of the core principles of devotional service. While doing that, you can always offer prayers to Krishna, saying, Krishna, as I am working to serve you today, I also have so many other things to take care of. So now I have some amount of time. I just wish that I could have more time so that I could do much better. Then Krishna basically would facilitate, which is what he talks about in 9.22 of the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, I'll preserve what you have and I will carry what you lack. It's an automatic process of accepting who you are today, accepting the environment, which includes the husband and the child and the birthday parties, and then doing your best in the context of the environment that you're in, accepting that this is the best environment because Krishna has arranged this. Regardless, even if this decision was not Krishna's and it was your decision, it is your karma, you accepted that this is the best arrangement because Krishna has made this arrangement. I will take this up today, so this is the best arrangement for me. I will do my best in this context of being able to give time to the 5 primary activities of devotional service as given in Shastra. And whilst doing so, I will also offer prayers to Krishna, expressing my desire that I would like to do more. Yeah? So that is what Krishna expects us to do. So there is no need for us to say that the birthday party somehow or the other is Krishna consciousness. We don't need to do that. We just simply need to understand that that is our environment. We need to accept the environment. Tolerate it if that's what it requires. Sometimes it needs tolerance. Sometimes it requires humility. Humility is where you accept the environment. Tolerate it. Then Krishna, when he sees that after accepting the challenge of the environment that you are in, after accepting the challenge of the body you have been placed in, you're doing your best, Krishna, and you're pushing yourself to the maximum, then Krishna will release more resources. This is what it means to be preserving what you have and carrying what you lack. Yeah, then we make progress slowly, steadily. As time progresses, we have greater ability to modify the environment. Krishna himself intervenes and modifies the environment so that we have better facilities. Sometimes there's a change of heart of people who are with us. There's sometimes a much better situation that envelops, because you're constantly desiring to be able to do this. Yeah, does it make sense? You need to first accept that because it's Krishna's arrangement. There is no need to justify one or the other. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. Let's keep it very practical. Yeah, we just have to be very practical, saying, yes, there's a small child and she wants a birthday to be celebrated. She invites her friends. That is perfectly fine. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Let her celebrate her birthday. Let her have a good time, because this is what we all expected when we were children. Yeah, to have a birthday celebrated. We do not need to break that down. We do not need to say that that shouldn't happen. If your husband is doing his work, without his work, there's really no way for him to maintain the family, without which you'll be spending more time trying to take care of things. So the point I'm trying to make is there really isn't a need for us to really break down activities that are connected to the material world, that are required from a practical perspective. We do not need to break it down to understand that that needs to happen or doesn't need to happen. We need to accept it, saying yes. Of course, if there's gross violation, we change it, we modify it, we reject it, but we accept everything else. That's Krishna's arrangement. In the context of today's arrangement, we want to see how best am I doing with life? Am I really pushing myself to the 100% that I ought to, or am I holding back? We need to see where we are in the context of what's already been given. It's like this. I'll give you an example. Ages back, 30 years back, 25 years, 30 years back, I was in a congregation. And in that congregation, there was a Prabhu who basically, we all started out, and it was a flat, it was an apartment. And we used to sit with our backs to 2 couches. And then we used to read back to Godhead because we didn't have books. We didn't have as many books. We had books, but we didn't really have many books. It was not in India. It was outside of India. And basically, 6 or 7 people used to assemble in that room. Then it became 30 people in the room, 40 people in the room. The room became crowded because it was an apartment. That Prabhu and his wife, they were extraordinarily generous because they used to encourage people like me who were very young at that point in time. to come and rest in their home at least once a week so that we could wake up for Mangalarti and experience Mangalarti, etc. So they were very generous with the facilities they had. Now, what happened? He was working in a bank, and all in a sudden, Krishna saw that the room was getting full and he was actually giving his whole house to the congregation. Krishna gave him a promotion in the bank, and the bank gave him an even bigger house. Then that big house became full. Krishna gave him an even bigger house as time goes on, because that house became full. Then it reached a point where the sixth group of people who used to sit between couches, it became a congregation of 3,000. So that had to happen in auditoriums and, whatever it is that used to happen on a weekly basis. The point I'm trying to make is, a good example is to be able to push ourselves with what has already been given. And when we push ourselves to the maximum with what's been given, then Krishna, looking at us very carefully, would decide that, okay, now you're pushing yourself, you need more resources. It's very, very, I would say common sense in terms of approach. Does it make sense? You need to first accept the environment. There really is no need for you to worry about things that are not related. In fact, they are related. Krishna wants you to accept it. And then after that, you will be able to overcome and be able to appreciate what's been given. Does it make sense?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so
Good.
much.
Good. Anybody else? Any question? Okay, there is. Sorry, yeah.
Thank you so much, Prabhu. My follow-up question is on the previous question that, how we are dealing with the material things is. So being in a body, what you're saying is the circumstances we are in, and to deal with our material, aspect, we should be doing what we are needing to do. But how do we adjust it in our spiritual life? Is that what matters? Is that what is the essence of it?
Can you, sorry, bro. Can you explain? Yeah, sorry.
What I'm saying to say is that, when we are in the material world and in the spiritual world, we are doing what we are doing from the material perspective, but how do we utilize the things in our spiritual world? Our spiritual life, is that what matters? The example you were giving of the person who was working in the bank and then has an apartment and then it moved to a house. So that house and flat is a material thing, but being utilized in a service of devotees and service of Krishna is what actually matters. Is that what is coming out of that thing? Is it? How do we understand that?
Yeah, because what happens is, as we progress further in Sambandha Gyan, let's assume, as we progress further in Sambandha Gyan, what is inside us goes from being such and such person in this world to being an associate of Krishna, progressively, right? Theoretically, year after year, as we progress in our Sambandha, we go from being a person of this world to being a resident of the spiritual sky in association with the devotees of Krishna. So can you basically visualize this? The more and more and more there is internal transformation and identification with a position in the spiritual sky, greater is our ability to be able to practically extend whatever we have in Krishna's service. Does it make sense? It is practically, yeah, it is basically Sambandha. Say, for example, if you were to give $1 million to Srila Prabhupada, he wouldn't look at it as $1 million. He would say, this is good because I can use it in Krishna's service. Yeah?
Yes.
Now, I will give you this example. Were you in Hartford? I don't remember. Were you in Hartford? Did you serve in Hartford? Or you didn't? In Connecticut. I'm not sure. Did you? Okay, maybe it was not you, Prabhu, but no, it's okay. Now, I'll give you this example. Pyari Mohan Prabhu, who is a Prabhupada disciple, he was a temple president. He is the temple president along with his wife, Jiva Mataji, in Hartford, Connecticut. Now, he gave this thing where Srila Prabhupada always used to carry a suitcase, very important looking suitcase, a briefcase along with him wherever he used to go. So Pyari Mohan Prabhu, he basically was a driver when he was in New York. In other words, he was Prabhupada's driver. He used to take Srila Prabhupada around. And one day, his nature, Pyari Mohan Prabhu's nature, he's a very wonderful, sweet soul. His nature is a little bit, I would say, like a child. So he was very curious about what's in the box. So one day, Srila Prabhupada's servant left the box behind, or rather suitcase behind, a briefcase behind in the car's backseat. And even before Srila Prabhupada could come, Pyare Mohan Prabhu opened the suitcase and the briefcase. He wanted to see what's inside because Srila Prabhupada never lets go of it. He found just a gamcha and something else, his spectacles, whatever. It's almost as if, there was nothing of importance. It appeared as if he was carrying $1 million, but it was basically his gamcha, his spectacles, etc. The context being that Srila Prabhupada was extraordinarily simple. When he left the world in 1977, when he disappeared from the pastimes here on the planet, at that point in time, there were millions of dollars in bank accounts that were managed by ISKCON that were directly under Srila Prabhupada's control. Now, should we say those dollars were not required, that we could do so when managed under a tree? The answer is no. So in that context, if you were to give him anything, he would just use it in Srila Prabhupada's service, because his sambandha, in Krishna's service, his sambandha was so great with Krishna that his existence was so great that he wasn't on this planet. That is why I keep saying you need to understand that you are in a train journey. You have a destination to go to. The beloveds, your beloved, are waiting at the other station. When you're traveling from one destination to the other, you're constantly very eager to meet the beloved. Your identity internally is that of wanting to meet with the beloved. Externally, you're acting according to the etiquette that is required in the train journey. So you need to basically embrace the fact that if someone gives you a bag of oranges in the train journey, then you're not going to say no to it. You're going to wait until you get out of the train so that you could offer it to the beloved. So that's the whole concept. Yeah. So we don't need to really differentiate much. Do the sadhana, and as we do the sadhana, our sambandha would increase. And as our sambandha increases, we would practically see no difference between us and Krishna's service. And there would be no distinction between material and spiritual. Everything would be the same. In reality, it is the truth. There is no such thing as material for a devotee. There is no such thing. We don't have anything material. The journey has already begun. Yeah, we have nothing material in our lives. Your home, your car, your job, there's nothing material. Yeah, the journey has already begun, because as each year goes by, you will use everything that you have greater and greater in Krishna's service. We all have seen that. The same thing is going to happen. Right, Prabhu? Is there any other question?
No, Prabhu, that helps. Thank you so much. I had a little different perspective, but you molded it the right way. So thank you so much. I understood now. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Okay, let's see if there are any chat questions. There are 4 chat questions. Can you please explain the significance of Purushottam Mass and what extra things we should do in this month? The significance of Purushottam Mass from an astrological calculation is such that a day is either determined as a lunar day, or it can be determined as a solar day. A lunar day is what we call a tithi in Sanskrit, and a solar day is vara. A solar day is basically that begins in one sunrise and lasts until the next sunrise. There's a difference in the quantity of time measured through tithis versus measured through counting from one sunrise to another. This difference, this minor difference, over a period of 3 years or so, accumulates into an entire month, which is called Adhik Mas. And as a consequence, this particular Adhik Mas is basically, I would say, an adjustment or calibration of wanting to meet the quantity of time that has elapsed if we were to count by lunar days versus solar days. So that's basically the astrological part. Now, what is it from a spiritual perspective? There are 2 aspects to it. Number 1 is when Chaturmasya begins. You see, the 4 months of the year, which is called the rainy season. People, the devotees in the past who were in the pre-modern, pre-industrial age times, they basically never used to travel. They used to assemble in an ashram, and then they used to associate because it was the monsoon in India, and as a consequence, they used to curtail travel. However, the other reason is that during the 4 months of Chaturmasya, it's considered highly inauspicious to start new activity because Krishna is resting during this particular period of time. He's resting. These 4 months of the year, he's resting. He's like taking a short nap. And when he is resting, the devotees generally don't do things such as marriages and, so on and so forth that are of a more mundane nature. Now, during the Chaturmas, it is not recommended. Now, from the perspective of Adhik Mas, which is the adjustment that I spoke of, where we are trying to adjust between the lunar and the solar days, and these are the 30 days where there's a balance that is being adjusted, it is considered to be quite inauspicious from the perspective of those who follow the Vedic samskaras. They would never do anything that is related to Vedic samskaras, because most of the people who follow Vedic samskaras, they have fruitive desires. They want to achieve things. If they do a sacrifice, they want the results to be paid off. If they want something to be done, they want results to be paid off one way or the other. So everything they do has a certain calculation. This particular mass, this particular window of time is considered inauspicious because the results would not be forthcoming for both the reasons that I mentioned earlier. One is it's considered to be an aberration from the perspective of astrological calculations. It's an overlap. It's a mere adjustment. The other is it's basically the falling into Chaturmas. Because of both these things, the people who follow Vedic injunction, where they just reject things because it is not going to give them fruitive results. So this is basically the general condition of what the Adhik Mas is. However, this particular period of time had a personality as well. This personality approached the Lord for shelter. Krishna in Goloka accepted this particular mass and said, I will become this particular month. And he becomes this month, theoretically, spiritually, practically, he becomes this month. Anything and everything can be completely subjugated and overwhelmed by the presence of the Lord. This particular month, he is particularly fully present in Goloka. He is completely accepted this month. So when we render service to him, especially to the divine couple, Shri Radha and Krishna, during this month, there are many significant blessings. What is it that I would do specifically during this month for me to be able to enhance my bhakti? What I would say is I will always start with chanting. I would always start with ground up. I would look at my day and see what is it that I can improve from the perspective of chanting. I would completely reorganize myself so that I could chant better. That is where I would start. By doing that, what I would do is I would achieve the result of being able to read Srimad Bhagavatam. I would achieve the result of being able to serve. All of that is contained within the chanting of japa during this particular month. So if there is one activity, one single activity that you're asking me about you want to do in this month, I'm saying just take up your day, look at it, look at your week, reorganize all of these so that for the rest of the month, you could just focus on improving your japa, doing so at a nice time, nice place. You're already planning for the next day's japa and the previous night. And before you go to bed, as a consequence, you wake up with enthusiasm because you have japa to do. If you can organize your day that way, then you would have contributed to your devotional service quite profoundly. Okay, now, now there's another question. How can you purify yourself and do good karmas always? Sometimes you have to tell lies even if you don't want to, relating to work. The manager is in the office, but you may have to say they are not in as per his or her request. Yeah, that's unfortunately the part of being a part of the material energy. Yeah. I think what you can do is you can simply basically say very clearly if that is the circumstances, you can try and avoid speaking things that make you uncomfortable. There is no need to be duplicitous, because the more and more we are duplicitous, then we basically have to be careful because we basically are compromising on a certain culture. Yeah. So when I use the word duplicitous, I'm talking about I'm thinking something inside, but I'm speaking something else outside. If that happens too often, it becomes a culture for us because it's a habit. Habit turns into a culture, and then it becomes a problem for us. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is there has to be a certain attempt, a very, very, very great attempt in terms of being able to mold ourselves in such a way that we are able to stick to representing the truth as it is. So even if your boss tells you that you have to lie to say that he is not in, when he is in, maybe you can represent it as truth. You could simply say he's not available to talk. Yeah, rather than saying he's not in. So I'm saying you can work towards making it a little different so that you are comfortable and you don't really develop an attitude of, keeping something in your heart while speaking something else. So Yeah, unfortunately, that's a part of what this world is. Now, sometimes you can't help doing bad karmas. Okay. Can you chant freely whilst doing your work without using a mala? Does the japa count? You can always chant, but I think you should also concentrate on your work. You want to make sure that you do your work well. So my point to you is that I think when you're working, concentrate so that you can do a good job. And while you're chanting, concentrate on the chanting so that you could do good chanting. But if your work allows you to also chant, yes, absolutely. You can chant without a mala. Yeah, even though we prefer a mala because it allows us to count, it allows us to dedicate our time. If you feel that you want to just chant without a mala, that is also perfectly fine. There's no harm done. Okay. Is there anything else?
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Prabhuji, I read in second canto. I really don't remember the verse, but it was written that there's 9-inch, 9-inch size Paramatma inside the body.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you please put more light on this? Is it physical substance?
No, it is not. The soul and the Paramatma basically is, there's no physical connection. It is the presence of the Lord. So generally, if you notice, in the Yoga Sutras, they're encouraged to meditate in the region of the heart. And as they're encouraged to meditate in the region of the heart, it means that the Lord is situated in that particular region. And when he appears, he is of that particular size. But there's nothing to do with the physical manifestation. It is entirely spiritual. It's entirely spiritual. Does it make sense? It has nothing to do with physical. In other words, it is not a physical existence. It is an entirely sublime spiritual existence, just as much as the soul exists, and the soul is not visible.
Yeah, and then what is the 9-inch size written in Bhagavatam? What is that?
Yes, 9-inch size is that when he appears, he is of that particular size in the heart, in the region of the heart. Yeah, when you're meditating. Does it make sense? If you want to put a measurement to the manifestation, then it is 9 inches. But it is not physical. Yeah, just because he is appearing and you are able to see him as the Paramatma, and you can say that by quantity, this is the size, it doesn't mean it's a physical manifestation. A subtle representation can also be of a certain size. Yeah. Sometimes, for example, yeah, you can see that the Lord basically can appear in a subtle form and there's a certain size. It doesn't mean there's a physical appearance there in terms of physical size.
All right, Prabhuji.
Okay. Good. So,
Hare Krishna,
what is your...
Prabhuji.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Sorry, Dandavat Pranam, Krishna Prabhupada. Prabhuji, in connection to Shafi Mataji's question that, I do remember that in one of the verses in the second canto, Prabhupada writes it's a 9 inches, the size of the Paramatma. But also we heard that he is Angusha Matra, right?
Yes.
So how can that be 9 inches? That's, always I had a question, but good she asked and I want to follow up.
Well, Angusha Matra is when he appears before Srila Parikshit Maharaj, when he is basically, in the womb. Yeah, he was the size of a thumb. Do you remember that verse where basically he's basically...
Yes.
So that is Angusha Matra. But what I'm trying to say is that the Lord can appear in the Paramatma can appear in any size he wants. The size is basically doesn't mean that there's a physical existence there. Like, for example, but that is the size that you can see. It is basically meditated upon in the chest, in the region of the chest by the yogis. And he appears in that particular position with, Shankha Chakra Gada standing on a lotus to receive. Yeah. So the Angusha Matra is where he appears before Parikshit Maharaj. where he is able to see him rotating his mace and he's protecting Parishit Maharaj. Yeah. So there are multiple representations. There is no contradiction,
Okay.
is the point I'm trying to make. Say, for example, that it is said, and I will give this example. There was someone who was very attracted to the beauty of his wife, and as he was walking on the streets in South India, and this is middle of 15th, 10th century, 10 centuries back, he never had a problem in showing extra affection for the wife, etc. On the road, like being more attentive to the wife than the surroundings, which is culturally, it was not considered proper by the class of people who existed then. It was quite a conservative society. But he used to be extra cautious of how he behaved with his wife. He was completely unmindful of the surroundings. Srila Ramanujacharya then went and basically asked one of his disciples to call this person. He said, call him, I want to talk to him. He seems to be an interesting personality. He seems to be so much immersed in love for his wife or attracted to his wife. He doesn't care for the surroundings. He seems to be just walking as if nobody else was existing. He's focused and he's completely focused on, like a yogi is focused, he's focused on his wife. So you could call him, I want to talk to him, because he seems to be a special character. So the disciple went and then called this devotee, this person, and then Hare Krishna. Yeah, so basically, can you put yourself on mute, please? One moment, yeah, just one moment. Okay, so Ramanujacharya had him called, and then what happened was that when he appeared, he asked him, what is it that seems to be enamoring you? What is it that makes you, look at your wife in the middle of the road where you're completely unmindful of the glances of society, etc. And what is it which is so wonderful that you keep, you do this? What is it that you see? Because Ramanujacharya couldn't understand. So the devotee explained that my wife has very beautiful eyes. So he said, my wife has very beautiful eyes and I'm very attracted to the eyes of my wife. So Ramanujacharya said, really? And then this is the reason why you're so distracted to such an extent that you don't even think the rest of the world is existing? When you walk on the streets, you keep, kind of, your behavior is such that you're unmindful of the I would say, the displeasure of others in that society? He said, yes, because I'm basically completely enamored by my wife and this is what she is. Basically this is what he told Ramanujacharya. Then Ramanujacharya said, what if I show you eyes that are even more beautiful than your wife's eyes? What would you do? And he said, then I would surrender to that personality. So then Ramanujacharya took him to the Srirangam temple in Srirangam, Trichy. There he took him to Lord Rangaji, Ranganathji. And in front of Lord Ranganath, Sri Ramanujacharya, because he was of such a high potency, a guru of such great position, he smeared bhakti, premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena. He took prema and he applied prema as an ointment on the eyes of this devotee in front of Lord Ranganath in Sri Rangam. Then this devotee's eyes basically could see spiritual reality from that particular moment. When he saw spiritual reality, he could literally see the Lord reclined on Ananta with Lord Brahma from his navel, with Mother Lakshmi at his lotus feet, etc. Now, the point I'm trying to make is, at that point in time, the deity's size, whatever, it was represented by the Lord. But is that the Lord's size? The answer is no. You see? That is not the Lord's size, but he represented himself. The deity became completely manifest. The deity became completely manifest in terms of the eyes of this devotee. He became one of the greatest devotees of the Lord after that. He became completely transformed, and he was a very rich man, and he gave all that he had just to the service of Sri Ramanujacharya. He completely dedicated his life to the service of the Guru, because the Guru gave him a vision of spiritual reality. And that vision was such that he could see the Lord, and he saw the beauty of the Lord and the beauty of the Lord's eyes. He was completely captured by that particular vision. And that vision gave him the faith and the experience for him to be able to move on. The reason I'm bringing this up is because if you've been to South India, you've gone to the Srirangam temple, that deity is perhaps around 10 or 15 feet. I don't recall, but more than 10 feet. Now, he saw the reality of the Lord as reclined on that particular space. But is the Lord, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, is he of that size? The answer is no. Yeah, he's much bigger. He is the Lord of the universe. He is lying on the Garbhodaka ocean. He is supporting all the planetary systems in reality. But he could manifest himself in the form of the deity, and he gave a vision. So I was just wanting to give an example that it is possible. Does it make sense? Haribo?
Yes, Prabhuji, completely makes sense. Thank you so much.
Not at all. I was just wanting to say that don't restrict yourself to any particular size, which is of a physical limitation. It changes. It changes. I just wanted to basically say that.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Not at all. Okay. Any other question or comment, please?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavad Pranam. Wonderful class. The question I have is not pertinent to today's discourse. Is that okay?
Yes, please continue.
Prior to Krishna consciousness, I was also reading other books of spirituality. Most of them touch on the Kundalini Yoga. So you have the different chakras and you activate certain chakra. Ultimately, it's the Sahasrara chakra, and that's enlightenment. My question is, how does that reflect, or how does that go in parallel with Bhakti Yoga? I mean, Bhakti Yoga, we also renounce, we are attached to Krishna. We also go to a point of enlightenment as much as, completely absorbed in Krishna. Does this chakra still work, or it's outside the parameters?
It is not. In fact, I've spoken about this in the beginning of second canto.
Yes,
yeah, I've spoken about this. I just
remember.
I was just wanting to say that the idea of Kundalini Yoga, and this is strictly what is being referred to in texts outside of ISKCON. Yeah.
Yes.
The idea of Kundalini Yoga is basically an idea which has been drawn from Ashtanga Yoga, and it is basically to purify our subtle body, which is composed of the chakras and the nadis.
Yes.
And as we purify the subtle body, they basically concentrate on the lower chakras, and then they slowly, steadily chanting mantras and doing asanas. They bring all the purification out. In other words, they raise the Kundalini, or the power to transform to the higher and higher chakras, finally reaching the Sahasrara. Now, this is a path of purification. Now, having said that, I want to say our path of purification is also the same from an internal perspective.
Yeah.
Our chakras also get purified. The Kundalini rises also in our service through the chanting of Harinam. There are experiences where one basically purifies and they are able to basically raise the internal potency. Basically, the Kundalini rises and then basically reaches a point of being able to reach the Sahasrara chakra. Now, what I'm trying to say is the Sahasrara chakra, or the highest chakra on top of the forehead, is where the general Kundalini practitioner would see the couple of Ardhanarishvara, which is half Shiva, half Shakti, and they would see them right at the top. And this particular representation is something where you're going right to the pinnacle of material nature, and then you're going beyond. Does it make sense? For us, we are actually having an objective that is even beyond. Our objective is practically in the spiritual sky, and we are already developing a relationship with Krishna on day one, and we purify ourselves by chanting Harinam. Our chakras get purified. That is the reason why we lose taste. But the process of purification for us is coming in touch with Krishna. For them, it is yogasanas and different, forced methods of trying to purify the lower chakras. For us, we are getting purified just by coming in touch with Krishna and having an objective much higher in the spiritual sky. When you have a goal that is transcendental and you're coming in touch with the object of your goal through Harinam and through deity worship and through Seva and through Srimad Bhagavatam on a daily basis, we practically purify ourselves without focusing on purification. Our focus is on developing the relationship. And this purification of the lower chakras happens in us as well. And it is represented by our disinterest in what we distinctly consider material. We are more focused on wanting to please Krishna. So there's an active purification that occurs in our process as well. But we don't focus on the objective of purification as being distinct from the goal. For us, the goal and the objective of purification are the same. We purify ourselves by chanting, and chanting also leads us to the goal, because the goal itself is also Nam. Nam is non-different from Krishna. So this whole experience is, going beyond the Sahasrara is to go and cross over into the spiritual sky. Yeah. And we are already doing that in a very effective, safe way. Yeah. Instead of forcing some change that can occur in the lower part of the chakras, etc., that can cause devastation and sickness, which many people experience when they're doing this. Yeah. Because the chakras are related to outside activity in the world. And if you don't do it in a supervised way, there will be instability in life, there will be instability in finances, instability in everything you can imagine. But in our situation, it's very gradual. The purification occurs. All of this is very gradual. Our situation is param drishtva nivartate. We always replace the lower with the higher, lower with the higher. We're constantly coming in touch with Krishna, who is transcendently situated. We are developing our relationship with him. So our system is actually the safest. But I can say that up to the process of purification or objective of purification, yeah, internally you can say the subtle body is getting purified. But how they do it versus how we do it and what we do, there has absolutely no connection between what we do and what they do. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
So in one sense, we do all of that, but that comes as a byproduct. We are not focusing on that.
Exactly. We don't focus on the object. We don't really focus on the process. We are focusing on the process of service.
Yes.
And we are coming in touch with transcendence.
Yes.
In Krishna's name and Krishna's service, there's transcendence. That transcendence practically destroys the material covering. We do not need to specifically, take a broom and cleanse ourselves. We are coming in touch with Krishna's name. It destroys our material qualities and brings us spiritual qualities automatically.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. That was really clear.
Sure. Any other question or comment?
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, one more question.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, when we talk about Krishna killed the demons and all demons went back to spiritual world, so those demons will never come back here in material world, like the example of Kamsa. So is he after Krishna killed him, he got spiritually situated? Will he never come back down? So is he in, because of he's now in spiritual sky?
Yes, it is an opportunity for him to be in the spiritual sky, but because his service itself was not anukul, it was pratikul. His relationship was pratikul. There is no proper sambandha. You see? There's no proper sambandha. There isn't. There is no sambandha with Krishna. It is not anukul. It is pratikul. He is against Krishna. He was against Krishna. He is basically someone who is against Krishna. As a consequence, the results are not quite the same as someone who is worshipping Krishna with great fondness.
So, but he got free from birth and death.
Yeah, but that is not the objective of devotional service, is the point I'm trying to make.
So, Prabhuji, my point is, how can someone get this also? But like he tortured all Vrindavan Vasis also along with Krishna. Then how can someone who hated so much with Krishna and he got liberation? I mean,
no, which essentially means that you should look at it from a different perspective. You should look at it from the perspective that if Kamsa can get liberation, then what's the point in my trying for liberation? I should try for love of Godhead. You should look at it from the different perspective. Liberation is coming in touch with Krishna. It is said that everyone who saw him was liberated because they already saw him. You see? But some of them were favorable, some of them were unfavorable. Some of them hated him with great venom. And some of them, when they hated him with great venom, then they had an opportunity basically to remove themselves from here, but they can't really get the opportunity which others got of rendering in pure devotional service. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that the auspiciousness of even being killed by Krishna can't be taken. It is transcendental. You can't take that away from Kamsa. He was killed in the hands of Krishna. So it was transcendental. Even being killed in the hands of Krishna gives them an opportunity to be outside of the material world. Krishna can never come in touch with this matter. So that is the case with Putana. She was pretending to be Krishna's mother, but she was given the place of mother. Her objective was to kill Krishna, but she came with a relationship of wanting to, pretending to be Krishna's mother. So the point I'm trying to make is anything to do with Krishna is very auspicious. Anything and everything. Does it make sense? It is not an ordinary situation. That if you read in the Srimad Bhagavatam, for millions and millions of all his existence, of Kamsa being the uncle who practically terrorized and did all of this in Raja, if you read about all of these things, then that man is also immortalized in certain ways. Does it make sense? He is immortalized.
Yeah.
So you are talking about a situation saying he's very sinful, how could it happen? And I'm saying, even if you're very sinful, if you come in touch with Krishna, Krishna touches you, Krishna kills you, that's one of the best things that could possibly happen. You know, the unfortunate part was he was pratikul, he was against him. If he was favorable and even pretended to be favorable like Putana, he would have achieved a much more lasting, place.
So, Prabhuji, once someone goes to spiritual world, he never comes back to material world?
No, he doesn't. They do not come back to the material world. But remember this. Whenever we read about people falling down after being born in the spiritual sky, is an example that we should understand very carefully. When Krishna was walking on the planet 5,000 years back, this was the spiritual sky. When he was in Vrindavan, this was very much the spiritual sky. In other words, there's no difference between 5,000 years back and today, because Krishna is still here enacting his pastimes. This is Goloka. But at the same time, 5,000 years back when he was walking and people could see his manifested pastimes, there were people who accepted him and there were people who rejected him. Those who rejected him are those who have fallen down from the spiritual sky. Those who accepted him are those who are a part of the eternal pastimes of the Lord. Does it make sense to you that if he was around 5,000 years back, there were people who were accepting and rejecting Krishna even 5,000 years back, which is what is being referred to when we say falling down. Yeah, there were people who rejected him. There were many who basically didn't accept him as God. They rejected him. Duryodhana rejected him. Shakuni rejected him. Dhritarashtra basically was blind. He didn't know what to do. So there were many who rejected Krishna, even though he was in front of them in this particular world, and Krishna was not in this world. He was literally a part of the spiritual sky. So they were all a part of, his presence in 5,000 years back. They rejected him. So that is what is meant by when they say that people fall down from Krishna's grace. Yeah, does it make sense? It is, you've been given a place, you're in front of him, and you still can't accept him. That is what is called as rejecting the spiritual sky. This is called enviousness.
Yeah, Prabhuji, but even Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra, they also now, you told that whosoever saw Krishna, they all got liberation?
No, they all went on the path of liberation. Does it make sense? They all started the path. Like, for example, even if anybody chants Hare Krishna, even out of jest, as what we would call as, what we call as in jest in terms of fun, even they start the process of spiritual. But you don't have to assume that they are going to liberate, they're getting liberated the right particular moment. They'll get the opportunity. They will be put in line. Like Ajamila's example, he chants, so he immediately is given another opportunity.
Yeah,
even though he
Prabhuji,
didn't mean to call. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused that it is said that in Mahabharata, everyone, those who were in, saw Krishna and even during the battlefield or those who saw Krishna, whether they accepted him as a god or whether they do not accept him as a god, they all got liberated, first of all.
But you should understand the word liberated. Okay, for example, someone comes in touch with Srila Prabhupada's mission. Someone comes in touch with Lord Chaitanya's mission. They serve as a devotee in the periphery. They do not take devotional service very seriously, but then they keep coming to our temples, and then after some time they stop. What would happen to them? In the next lifetime, they would get an opportunity to continue this process wherever Lord Chaitanya's mission is. In the subsequent lifetime, if they improve upon the devotional service, they'll get one more chance. So the path to come back has opened up. It is like a gate and a door that has opened up. It doesn't really mean that they immediately, everything is over. Does it make sense? The path has opened up now. Yeah, they are going back because now they basically have the ability to go back. Yeah, they literally have seen him. Now they will have an ability to go back. The path has opened up, a door has opened up. So in the context of eternal time, in the context of longer period of time, this is liberation in the context. For you, 60, 70, 80 years, human life for us is the time of human lifespan. But in the context of eternal time, in the context of a longer period of time, this is nothing. So the journey of the soul has already begun because they've had darshan of the Lord. The journey of the soul has already begun when they chant Harinam. The journey of the soul has already begun when they catch some kind of, do some service in one of our centers, distribute a book or buy a Bhagavad Gita. How many times have we seen people who just buy out of pressure and then you find them landing in the temple after some time? This is the point I'm trying to make. You have to understand it in the context that, yes, the journey has already begun. What we consider as time is not exactly the time span that Shastra basically devotes much to. Does it make sense? We are not even a part of one lay of Lord Brahma. You see, we are so minuscule in our lifespan that it is just unimaginable for us. So that is what the point I'm trying to make is yes, the answer is yes, but to think that it is all going to happen instantaneously is not the right answer, is the point I'm trying to make. They'll be given opportunities.
Yes, Prabhuji, yes. So
Yeah.
I got it.
Good.
Prabhuji, but my next question regarding same line is those who achieve the Brahma Jyoti, do they come back or they are always there?
Well, there is an opportunity for them to be there. But then the point is that because they are situated in a circumstance where there isn't a relationship, and the soul by nature is required, basically the soul by nature, wants to have a relationship and wants to have service with the Lord, the desire of wanting to basically serve comes up and wanting to basically come, the wanting to be a part of the Lord's service does come up. Yeah? Does it make sense? Then they come back and they start the process again. So for example, you are looking at it from the perspective of the body. The four Kumaras, Srila Sukadev Goswami, they were all liberated. Does it make sense? They were all in the Brahmajyoti. They had already achieved the Brahmajyoti while being in this body. But they had not come in touch with the Lord. When Srila Sukadev Goswami came in touch with the Lord, when the Kumaras came in touch with the Lord by coming in touch with different objects of devotional service, they basically developed an interest, even though they were liberated, to pursue devotional service. So that's why it is said that devotional service is attractive even for those who are liberated. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, one is liberated means that they're already in the Brahmajyoti. Sukadev Goswami was already in the Brahmajyoti. He was liberated. He was Brahmabhuta Prasannatma. But once he came in touch with devotional service, he said, I want to pursue devotional service. You're looking at it in a very mechanical way, in the sense, I'm not criticizing you. I'm saying we all tend to do it. You're looking at it in a mechanical way that the soul has to depart and leave the material sky. It will not come back. I'm giving you a picture which is a little different so that you can understand it more clearly. That there can be souls who can be in touch with Krishna who reject him, which means they have fallen from spiritual grace even though they had an opportunity. There can be souls who are liberated while being in this body who can desire devotional service, which means that there's something beyond liberation and one can feel that they need to pursue something else because just being liberated doesn't cut it for them. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Does it make sense?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah, it's a little abstract. One of the ways to do this is to write down things that we don't understand and keep chanting. One day it will become, like a realization develops on it as well. Yeah, it's a matter of also experiences. So it'll happen. One moment. I'm just trying to see if there's a chat question. Yes, there is a chat question. Can someone who has gone to the spiritual world choose to come back to the material world? Did Srila Prabhupada not come from the spiritual world? Yes. This is basically a representation of how much love Krishna has for those of us who have still not gone back. He keeps sending his very, very dear servants again and again so that they could pick us up. They make all the sacrifices and they come to this world and they stay amongst us even when we are completely against what they originally represent. And they intersperse and give us what needs to be given. Can someone who has gone to the spiritual sky come back? Absolutely. And this is due to the fact that they want to do what is required for the pleasure of Krishna. But whilst being on this planet, they still are in the spiritual sky. Even though you would see them here, they're still very much a part of the spiritual phenomena. Both existences can happen, even though they are in physical bodies. Yeah, we should understand it from the perspective. Both can happen.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please answer.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, so you said that essence of all the Vedas is crystallized into 4 verses. And this has been told by Lord Narayan to Lord Brahma.
Yes.
So the entire Bhagavatam is based on these 4 verses. So it's like a detail, whatever we read further. Is it like a detail of these 4 verses, Prabhu?
Yes, in one sense you can understand it that way. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Similarly, in Bhagavad Gita, the Chatushloki Bhagavad Gita is similarly the same thing?
Yes. See, there are 2 different things. There is something called a Paribhasha Sutra, which is the essence of the entire scripture. For Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion, it is Anya Bilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam, Bhakti Ruttama. For the Bhagavatam, it is Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, which we read in the 1st canto. Then for Bhagavad Gita, it is Bhagavad Gita 15:15, where Krishna says, I am in everybody's heart, and from me come remembrance and forgetfulness. I am the representation and the goal of all the Vedas. This is called the Paribhasha Sutra, which means this is the essence of the entire scripture, is contained in that one particular verse. The Chatushloki of Srimad Bhagavatam, Chatushloki of Sri Bhagavad Gita, is basically the core principles that are being enunciated in that particular scripture, which is being brought forth amongst in these 4 principles, the 4 verses. So when Lord Narayan met Lord Brahma, he spoke the 4 verses to give him instructions on the entire principle of what would be the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, this is the 4 principles. Now these 4 principles were taken up by Srila Vyasadeva when he received it from Lord Brahma. Yeah, and he extrapolated these 4 principles into the Bhagavad Purana by giving us all the pastimes of the Lord, which were completely supported by these 4 foundational principles. Either they were differentiated in terms of, how these 4 principles were violated or not happening, or they were completely in line with these 4 principles. So that is how the Srimad Bhagavatam was extrapolated. Does it make sense?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes. And Lord Narayana is like the first expansion of Vasudeva.
Lord Narayana is Vasudeva.
Okay. So
Lord Narayana is Vasudeva. Yes.
Okay.
So there is basically Krishna in Goloka, then Balaram, then there is the first quadruple expansion in Dwaraka. That first quadruple expansion of Dwaraka, Vasudeva in that particular expansion is Krishna, who is completely in Aishwarya. He is a king, Dwarkadish. Okay. Now from this first quadruple expansion, you have the second quadruple expansion. The Vasudeva becomes Narayana, then Sankarshana becomes Mahasankarshana, etc. So yes, so that is who he is.
Okay. Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Not at all. Okay.
Hare
So
Krishna,
yes, Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, I have a quick question. I wanted to understand the difference between Vaikuntha Loka and Goloka Dham. So my understanding right now is that there are many Vaikuntha planets and Goloka Dham is one of them, which is full of all the rasas, and all other Vaikuntha planets are like one specific rasa in each planet. So what I wanted to understand here, that as we say, when we reach Goloka Dham, we do not come back to the material world. So is it the same for other Vaikuntha planets too?
Absolutely. Basically, the Vaikuntha planets are where Krishna represents himself as Narayana. Narayana is Rama. Narayana carries the principle of Lord Narasimhadev. Narayana is Varahadev. These are three principal expansions or avatars where the Narayana Amsa is completely present. Does it make sense? Now, the expansion of Sriman Narayana is Karanodakashayi Vishnu, who lies on the Karana ocean. His expansion is Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, who maintains the universes. His expansion is Sirodakashayi Vishnu, who maintains the individual entities. Now, the Shirodakashayi Vishnu is also the Vishnu who lies on the Shira ocean, which is within the universe. And as a consequence, he is also the Gunavatar Vishnu, the mode of goodness. He expands and he comes as Matsya Avatar, Lord Hayagriva, etc. So that is the Shirodakashayi Vishnu. There is a basic representation of the Shirodakashayi Vishnu avatars. These are the avatars. So from that perspective, what is the difference between Goloka and Vaikuntha? You can say Goloka is a Vaikuntha planet. Yes, it is in
Yes.
Vaikuntha. You can say it is Goloka is a Vaikuntha planet. Like Kunta is material world, Vaikuntha without misery is the spiritual sky. But topmost in the spiritual sky is Goloka, where the whole idea of rasa is completely established in the mood of sweetness and relationships between the Lord and his personal devotees. There is even the conception of Aishwarya is completely removed. If you notice in Vrindavan, the Aishwarya is removed, and all the Aishwarya is removed in the sense it is not visible in the pastimes. It is completely overwhelmed by sweetness. It's pure sweetness. Yeah. And then
Right.
all the Aishwarya is represented in Dwaraka, where Krishna is a very opulent king. And then where people who are very attracted to that opulence, they worship Dwarkadish. Those who are very attracted to playing with him on the sands of Vraja, completely forgetting any connection with him and being God, they play with him in Vraja, in Vrindavana. So that's why Vrindavan contains all the rasas, because it is the purest, it is the origin of all rasas, because practically Krishna's rasas in Vrindavan are not tainted and they are not disturbed by any form of his displaying his godliness. There's only sweetness. That is why Goloka is the topmost planet, because all the rasas are contained here. In Vaikuntha, all the rasas are contained. Yeah. So, for example, with Lord Narayan, there is particular representation. If you take, for example, Lord Ram, there was Sakya. Lakshman was a brother and he was also a friend. Vibhishana was a friend. Then there is Dasya, and then there is Madhurya in terms of Mother Sita and Lord Ram. And then there is also Vatsalya in terms of, Dasharath Maharaj and Mother Kaushalya and others. So you can find the rasas in Dwaraka, in Ayodhya as well. However, in Ayodhya, the Lord is assuming his nature as Narayan, the protector of the entire creation. He is basically coming with complete Aishwarya. So even the brother Lakshman doesn't have the ability to embrace him at will. He doesn't have the ability to jest with him. He doesn't have the ability to play with him, because it's all restricted, because he is playing the role of a ruler. He's playing the role of an administrator. It doesn't mean that Ayodhya doesn't have the other rasas which Braja has. It has rasas, but it is all hidden by this external formality. In Braja, there is no formality, and all the formalities have been done away with. And Krishna is completely submerged. It is really, you can see the representation of Krishna giving himself to his devotees. Yeah? It is giving himself, he is giving himself to his devotees in Braja, with no basic, no formality at all. But in Ayodhya, all the rasas are present, but there's so much formality. That is why we say that Shuddha Bhakti, in terms of Shuddha Nam, is the relationship of the devotees of Vraja with Krishna, Vrajendra Nandan. Because when Yashoda Maya calls Krishna, then her calling of Krishna, there is absolutely no Aishwarya. There's just the motherly Vatsalya. But Mother Devaki, when she's calling Krishna in Dwaraka, she remembers the forearm form. She remembers he is a king, and therefore there is Aishwarya that is covering that relationship. So you can't really say it is the same as what it is in Vraja. That is why Vraja is the pinnacle of relationships with the Lord. So I just want to clarify that rasas are present in Vaikuntha as well. Yeah. Sometimes you may not find it as clearly. For example, in the case with Narasimhadev and Prahlad Maharaj, his representation and his relationship with Prahlad Maharaj was of a father and son. Prahlad Maharaj looked upon Narasimhadev. Narasimhadev basically sat on the throne of his father. He felt sorry for this boy, this very young boy who had lost his father. He took the seat of his father, held this boy just as a father would, kept him on his lap, and wanted to give him protection. So the interaction between Narasimhadev and Prahlad Maharaj is considered to be Narasimhadev being the father, Prahlad Maharaj being the son. This is basically a Vaikuntha relationship, but it is neutral because the parents, when the Lord becomes the parent, serving him is very difficult. You see, it's neutral. So that is why we say Prahlad Maharaj is in Shantaras, is because it's a neutral relationship where the Lord is basically the father and Prahlad Maharaj is basically the son. So when he is looking at Prahlad Maharaj, Narasimhadev wants to become the son. That is how he is experiencing rasa as Lord Ram. Now he becomes Lord Ram and he is experiencing the rasa of being a son. Does it make sense? So there are different levels of rasa that you can see in the different avatars within Vaikuntha, but it doesn't mean that all the rasas don't contain. There's some rasa that just gets projected more profoundly. But the idea of the Vraja being the origin of all is because it is pure. If you want to say there's a father-mother relationship with Krishna, the one that is found in Vraja is pure. They have no conception that he is God. If you want to see friendship where there is no conception that he is God, you will find it in Vraja. If you want to see the relationship between, I would say, Radharani and Krishna and the other gopis and Krishna here, where there is no conception that he is God, but they are basically wanting to follow, Krishna in terms of, the Madhurya Ras mellow. So the point I'm trying to make is that it exists, but it is overly covered by Aishwarya. Sometimes one particular rasa projects itself while the other is absent, etc. Just to give you context.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for such detailed explanation. Thank you so much.
No problem. Can you explain why Sri Narad Muni is a Vaikunthavasi, even when he knew about Krishna is Goloka? What qualifies one for Vrajaprem? Sri Narad Muni basically is a Vaikunthavasi, but you got to realize, if you come to Vraj, just before you start Govardhan Parikrama, there is a Narad Kund. Yeah, so he is here as well in Vraj. In different parts of Vraj, Sri Narad Muni is there interacting and basically playing the role as he is supposed to. Yeah, he is there in this. Enthusing devotees, giving bhakti is being done by him here as well. So there is no doubt. Even our parampara starts from Brahmaji, but then Narad Muni is there. So we really can't say that Narad Muni is a Vaikunthavasi. I think as a general explanation, we can say he is a Vaikunthavasi because he is always chanting Lord Narayana's names. Om Namo Narayana. Yes, he's always chanting. So there's no doubt that in that sense you can say that he is a Vaikunthavasi. But it is not so that he's not connected to Vraja. Now, what qualifies one for Vraja Prem? What qualifies one for Vraja Prem? There really can't be any qualification whatsoever. How can we qualify ourselves to be even a speck of dust beyond the material sky? We have no qualification for anything. So in what is it that qualifies one for Vraja Prem? We have no qualifications for anything. All we are experiencing is Mahaprabhu's mercy. So in that sense, we have to understand this as Mahaprabhu's mercy. Is it possible to move from one planet to planet, from planet to planet once in the spiritual sky? This is a second question, someone else's question. Is it possible to move from planet to planet once in the spiritual sky? The answer is that planet to planet in the spiritual sky, there is no time boundary. In fact, it is said that there is basically no sense of how big the spiritual sky is and in terms of travel. But I think there's a certain sense of contentment in service with the particular objects of worship in different parts of the spiritual sky. So if someone is in Ayodhya, they don't want to leave Ayodhya because Lord Ram is there. So that's the point I'm trying to make. They are not practically saying that I want to go elsewhere. So there are devotees who are associated with Lord Ram eternally. They would always remain with Lord Ram. They don't want anything better in that sense. But there are possibilities of moving from one place to the another and one spiritual planet to another. This has been seen before in certain other scriptures. Okay, is there any other question? I can take one or two questions, one last question before we go.
सुबह सुबह जूस निकाल रहे हो?
Hello. So, okay, I think I don't have any more questions. So I think I'll end here. And if I've left out anything, either in chat or any other way, please do write to me. I will answer those. Please write to me. Feel free to write to me, please. So we'll end here, and we'll meet again the following session. Next week we'll start 10th chapter of 2nd Canto, and we'll continue further. Thank you for joining me. Hare Krishna, everyone. Srila
Hare
Prabhupada ki
Krishna.
jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji.